Why the CIA created Pokemon Go.
Most people don't know that the founder of Pokemon Go, John Hanke, received funding from In-Q-Tel, which is the venture capital firm created by the CIA.
What?
And while you and your friends were walking around your city, scanning the earth to catch your favorite Pokemon, the game's developer, Niantic Incorporated, was collecting all that data and using it to build advanced 3D maps to facilitate military attacks on third world countries. You see, Pokemon Go was created by the same guy who essentially created Google Earth. John Hanke was the co-founder of Keyhole, which developed a 3D digital mapping program called Earth Viewer. Keyhole's Earth Viewer 3D client application uses video game-like 3D graphics and access to massive databases of network-hosted Earth information, including satellite imagery and aerial photography, to produce an interactive digital model of the Earth. The product was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before in the early 2000s, but it was unclear what its use case would be, and therefore Keyhole was bleeding money. Every few months for years, John would find himself scrambling to raise money from Silicon Valley investors to keep the lights on. That was until In-Q-Tel saved his company from going under.
Then we got our really a lifeline from a kind of a
So Pokemon Go was created just for data purposes.
usual source. In-Q-Tel was this new little venture capital firm that was basically a government VC firm with money from the intelligence community. So that was one of the few funds in the valley that was doing real business, and they were making a lot of investments at the time. This was in the kind of post 9/11 security ramp up period. And so they found out about our technology and invested a few $1 million in the company.
Thanks to In-Q-Tel's funding, Keyhole was supplying technology to troops in Iraq and the Pentagon, and they ultimately became a profitable company due to the massive amount of government contracts rolling in. Shortly after, Keyhole was acquired by Google in 2004, and they turned this technology into what we now know as Google Earth.
Wow, I didn't know that.
After Google's acquisition, John Hanke became the vice president of product management for the company's Geo division, where he oversaw products like Google Earth and Maps. Google Earth was revolutionary because it gave everyone access to detailed satellite imagery of nearly the entire planet from a home computer. You could explore
Yeah, Google Earth and Google Maps is remarkable, I think. It's insane.
familiar cities, inspect neighborhoods before moving, and plan trips, but they quickly realized it was far more powerful than that. Humanitarian organizations began using it to coordinate disaster relief. Scientists monitored deforestation and climate change. Archaeologists used it to discover previously unknown ruins. Journalists investigated war zones, and governments used it because it was better than anything they had access to.
The product ended up being used in ways that we never anticipated.
Google's everything
I guess I'll
too,
just say
as
it
well.
that way. When Katrina happened in New Orleans, the Coast Guard was using Google Earth and Craigslist to basically find where people were trapped and send helicopters in to rescue them. Kind of crazy. You would think, well, the government, they've got lots of sophisticated software, but as it turns out, web software that's available that already has the data in it, it's ready, easy to use, a breakthrough, really.
But after working for 6 years inside Google's corporate ecosystem, Hanke wanted the freedom to combine everything he'd learned about digital maps and augmented reality to create a video game. Now, if you ask me, that seems like a crazy career change. Technically, the foundation of John's Earth Viewer product started in college while working with his classmates on an open-world video game idea. But he knew the technology had much more potential, and it did. So after changing the world with his vision, creating a CIA-funded startup for military operations, and then getting acquired by a tech giant, going back to being a video game developer seems like a massive career and lifestyle change. That is, unless it was part of a larger plan. Google actually did not want John Hanke to leave the company. For whatever reason, they felt that his video game idea might become valuable to them in the future, so they convinced him to create Niantic Labs as an autonomous unit inside of Google. Basically, they gave him the freedom of creating a startup, but using all of Google's resources inside of Google's walls. If it failed, Google would get their employee back, and if it succeeded, then Google could be an early investor or part owner of a major video video game innovation? Niantic's first major product was an app called Field Trip, a virtual tour guide that analyzed the user's location, provided suggestions for nearby landmarks to visit, and offered information about the area. It wasn't much of a game, but it laid the foundation for their next big project called Ingress. Launched in 2012, Ingress was an augmented reality mobile game that prompts users to explore their neighborhoods and locate portals at nearby landmarks. This was quite literally the same idea as Pokemon Go. Those who played it were intoxicated by the addictive gameplay loop, although it failed to pull in a large player base even years after its release. Luckily for Niantic, one of the game's players would prove to be an invaluable asset with direct ties to the Pokemon Company. A Japanese Google Maps engineer named Tatsuo Nomura pitched the idea of placing Pokemon inside of Google Maps as an April Fool's joke. He traveled to Japan and got direct permission from the Pokemon Company to implement the feature. John Hankey asked Nomura to show the Pokemon Company's executive board the Ingress game. Little did they know that the president of the Pokemon Company was already a massive fan of the game. And because of this, Niantic was able to secure a partnership with Nintendo and create Pokemon Go. They launched the game on July 6, 2016, but they never could have anticipated the chaos that would come next. In just 2 months,
man, I remember like when everybody was playing this game and people were like falling off places just to catch Pokemon. It was so chaotic. The fact that this was 10 years ago too is crazy. Feels like it's been longer than that.
Months after its release, the app was downloaded over 500 million times and an estimated 21 million players logged in every single day
Candy
on
Crush.
average. Not only had it surpassed the success of mobile games like Candy Crush or Clash Royale, but it was pulling in more engagement than websites like Twitter and Facebook.
Oh wow.
The concept was simple. You walked around your neighborhood and searched for virtual Pokemon. When you found one, the game used your phone's camera to make it look like a Pokemon was right in front of you, and you used Pokeballs to catch them and add them to your collection. The game incentivized users to explore the world around them, offering various digital Pokestops at notable locations or landmarks. These Pokestops served as a hub to collect in-game items and use special lures to attract more Pokemon. This also included Pokemon gyms. Players selected from one of 3 teams and would compete with rival Pokemon hunters to control areas to earn Pokecoins and buy upgrades. Pokemon Go wasn't just another mobile video game. It transformed your local neighborhood into a fantasy world. This is why it became a cultural phenomenon almost instantly. Public parks were overflowing with players searching.
It looked like this all over the world.
Searching for rare Pokemon. Restaurants and stores used nearby Pokestops to advertise their businesses, and content creators were racking up millions of views just by playing the game. The game skyrocketed into mainstream pop culture, becoming a topic of discussion on late-night television shows, and was infamously referenced by Hillary Clinton during her 2016 presidential campaign.
I don't know who created Pokemon
I remember
Go,
this.
but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
It's safe to say Pokemon Go was taking over the world, but it wasn't just making headlines for its record-breaking numbers. It was also being linked to real-world accidents, life-altering injuries, and even deaths. Only days after the game's release, 2 men were hospitalized while playing Pokemon Go. They hopped a fence to get access to a Pokemon on the other side, ignoring a sign warning pedestrians of the unstable ground on a nearby cliff, which both men eventually fell down. The players sustained serious injuries, but fortunately survived. Others were not so lucky. A truck driver in Japan hit 2 women while playing Pokemon Go.
They're playing while they're driving too. I forgot. Yeah, they do that too.
Players of the game began to find themselves in increasingly dangerous situations as both drivers and pedestrians were getting distracted.
$7.3 billion in damage
by the app. And the more people became immersed in the world of Pokemon, they lost touch with the world around them. Players began disrupting religious services and funerals. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. asked people to stop playing the game inside of their establishment. Players were also being disruptive at the Arlington National Cemetery, causing problems for grieving families and members of the military paying their respects. As you can imagine, after Pokemon Go exploded in popularity, the video game industry became extremely interested in learning more about the developers. John Hankey of Niantic Labs was interviewed in front of a live audience at TechCrunch in San Francisco and seemed like he could not be less interested.
First, and most importantly, what team are you on?
I'm yellow. I'm all about the yellow. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Team Instinct, anyone out there?
Yeah.
Team Instinct, there we go. I'm not going to try and button that back up on stage.
It's crazy that the creator of the game couldn't even properly answer the question, what team are you? Which refers to one of the 3 factions players can join once they reach level 5. Team Valor, which is red, Team Mystic, which is blue, or Team Instinct, which is yellow. He just said, the yellow one. The interviewer was clearly a massive Pokemon fan, and Hanky seemed like the total opposite. It was disappointing to players that the most viral game of
doesn't even play
2016
himself.
surrounding one of the most beloved IPs of all time was being spearheaded by a boring corporate suit. But what was particularly interesting was his insights on working with governments before they launched the game in different countries.
So we're still in the rollout phase of the game.
Do you know what the next rollout country is going to be?
I have a pretty good idea, but it is pending getting things squared away on the government relations side and getting everything prepared, so I can't say right now. It has been interesting that, we didn't really anticipate the level to which it would attract interest from government people and policy people and things like that, but that's become part of the dialogue at this point, so we're getting, more well-versed in those skills.
Now, we don't really know what interests governments had with the game. Now, I'd imagine governments had obvious concerns, like tens of thousands of people gathering in parks, people blindly walking into traffic, etc. But Hanky didn't use the word concerns. He said interests. Another thing to note was that South Korea refused to let Google export its detailed government map data to foreign servers out of fear that it could expose military bases and other sensitive locations to North Korea, which made Pokemon Go nearly impossible to launch across most of South Korea. China also heavily regulates foreign access to geographic data and blocked Google Maps entirely because it considers detailed mapping a matter of national security.
I didn't know Google Maps was banned in China.
While most players saw Pokemon Go as a harmless mobile game, entire governments were already treating the data underneath it like a potentially dangerous military asset. The question is, did Niantic Labs know that they were wielding a dangerous military asset? Well, there was this one controversy that came up where iPhone users discovered that signing in through Google gave Niantic full access to their accounts. Per Google's own description, this meant access to both view and modify anything in the account. To many, they believed that this meant unfiltered access to their images, videos, and emails, although it wasn't that simple. Niantic stated that it only had access to the user's IDs and email addresses, and Google personally verified that no additional information was given to the company. So since Niantic couldn't steal the data just by someone making an account, they had to trick users into giving it up for free. And what resulted was one of the most ambitious geospatial data collection projects ever hidden behind a mobile game, one whose technology would later facilitate devastating military operations. 4 years after the game's release, Niantic introduced an interesting new feature: AR mapping tasks. Pokestops marked by notable landmarks would now offer users rewards if they completed AR scanning prompts. These required players to scan the surrounding area with their phone's camera for about 20 to 30 seconds. Interesting that this feature was not available for children's accounts. From the player's perspective, the feature was relatively harmless. They had already become accustomed to Pokemon Go tracking their location and having access to their cameras. So when Niantic offered free rewards with the promise of game improvements, players were eager to take part. Niantic claimed that the data collected would inform the game's engine to understand the depth and complexity of the real world. This would make for a way more immersive experience, in which virtual objects could seamlessly integrate with the world around them. In hindsight, it seems like an evil genius plan. The man who created Google Earth and worked directly with the CIA and international intelligence organizations was getting people to voluntarily 3D scan the world around them while they think they're just helping Niantic make a better Pokemon game. These scans would help develop a much larger technology called Lightship VPS, which stands for Visual Positioning System. The satellite-based technology of GPS was useful, but not optimized for the best augmented reality experience. For example, it might be able to tell you that you're near a statue, but it's typically incapable of understanding where you are relative to the landmark, whether you are behind it or in front of it, if you are 3 feet away or 30 feet away. This information isn't important when getting general directions instructions for a road trip, but when it comes to making accurate drone strikes on enemy base camps without harming innocent civilians, it can make a massive difference. When players scanned a landmark, they recorded more than just a video. It tracked the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the user's device. It also utilized the phone's accelerometer and gyroscope, allowing the system to consider the phone's position and orientation. Considering all of this data, the scans could be used to make reliable inferences about the user's distance from both the landmark itself and the surrounding environment. Every scan submitted was unique, taken at different angles, positions,
It analyzes
and
everything and measures everything
Each video
too.
was divided into approximately 300 individual images, all of which were pieced together with other scans to create a full 3D digital map of the area. Essentially, Niantic was creating the world's largest, most detailed 3D scan of the entire world, and Pokemon Go players were helping for the most innocent intentions. VPS could compare the player's live footage against this virtual world to determine the player's exact location, which helped influence where objects and Pokemon would be anchored within the real world. Think about how NPCs in Grand Theft Auto sometimes mindlessly walk around with no intention or logic applied to them. Pokemon Go was similar initially, but with this new technology, the Pokemon could now be programmed to interact with their surroundings. Instead of being mindlessly placed on the ground, they would be able to hide behind the landmarks or even climb on top of them. Put simply, the goal of this technology was to make a near-perfect replica of the world the way that humans would experience it, so that the Pokemon in the game could literally interact with the world the same way a human might. And players were willing to sacrifice 30 seconds of their day if it meant free rewards and a better experience down
That
the
is just
line.
insane.
And by November of 2022, Niantic revealed that they had developed more than 120,000 digital maps of various locations throughout the globe. But technology this powerful would be wasted if it were only used for Pokemon Go, and Niantic understood this deeply. While they stated their goal was always to give people tools to become 21st century explorers, it felt like they were leaving a massive opportunity on the table. But VPS also had a major limitation. The system was only able to recognize information it had already been given. If a landmark had only been scanned from the front, the model would not be as effective when used from behind. And if it had received no prior information on a landmark, there was nothing the model could work with to provide an immersive experience. They had now gathered enough data for 1 million different waypoint locations to have full VPS integrations, but there were still millions of locations that had not been fully scanned. Niantic sought to fix this issue with their large geospatial model announced in 2024. The goal was to take all of the combined data they had collected and use AI to make inferred guesses about partially unscanned locations. Niantic uses a church as an example. If players had only scanned the front of a particular church, the VPS technology might be unable to recognize footage taken from behind, but the large geospatial model could infer based on thousands of other churches that had been fully scanned and make an educated prediction about what the back of that specific church would actually look like. Humans have the ability to do this naturally. We are capable of applying our personal lived experience to make inferences about our environment. If I showed you the front of a house, you could probably make a pretty good guess about what the back of it looks like. You might not get every detail right, but you'd expect windows in roughly the same places, a back door, maybe an AC unit, a fence, or a patio. Your brain does not know that specific house. It's recognizing patterns from thousands of houses you've seen before. Niantic wanted AI to learn that same instinct, but with near perfect precision. And only months after announcing their large geospatial model, Niantic made the shocking decision to sell Pokemon Go. While Scopely Incorporated acquired the rights to Niantic's catalog of games for $3.5 billion, Niantic retained all of the data, research, and technology they had been developing over the last decade, which includes their VPS and geospatial models. In other words, they kept their most valuable IP, sold the rest of their got the data, and were ready to move on, leaving Pokemon in the dust, which to some makes it seem like they never cared about Pokemon in the first place, and it was all a part of a bigger operation. The company shifted its focus away from video game development, and under the leadership of John Hanke, began working on Niantic Spatial. The company made it clear this technology had far more potential than improving augmented reality experiences. It had the ability to help both humans and machines to understand the world and navigate it. instead of figuring out where to spawn Pokemon, the technology could be used to train a robot or AI-powered vehicles to determine their locations without the use of GPS. Like, you know how outside of your town, you don't really know where you're going or where you are, but thankfully you have access to GPS on your phone. Well, they're working on a technology for machines, robots, or vehicles that would essentially install a perfect one-to-one understanding of the entire world. So you could theoretically place it anywhere and it'll know exactly where it is and exactly how to get where it needs to go in the fastest way possible. And initially, this tool was being marketed as something that could enhance manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, construction, tourism, entertainment,
I'm telling you,
and
AI
education.
is really
Like a
changing
warehouse
the
worker
world
could
now.
use the VPS technology to navigate the facility and streamline the process of conducting inventory management instead of just like walking around the building and understanding where things are and where they need to go. But Niantic was also getting involved in areas that most might not have expected. This became clear when Niantic Spatial announced it was teaming up with a company called Vanter in December of 2025. While Niantic had its roots in the gaming industry, Vanter had always been a part of the intelligence and defense sectors. They are best known for creating mapping systems used by military commanders and soldiers to analyze the battlefield and coordinate. This partnership may seem bizarre on the surface, but it was actually a perfect match. Vanter had developed a visual positioning system called Raptor. Similar to VPS, Raptor was capable of determining its location by analyzing its environment and making inferences. When a drone became disconnected from GPS signal, it could utilize Raptor to assess the roads, buildings, and hills to figure out its position relative to Vanter's own personal map. However, the technology was relatively limited as it gathered data from airborne drone footage, meaning its pool of data was limited to the sky. This is where the partnership really starts to make sense. VPS system did everything Raptor did, but on the ground floor. Specifically, it gave the same tools to both troops on the ground as well as AI-controlled robots and vehicles. With Vanter in the sky and Niantic on the ground, the two companies hope to create a shared digital map that can be used by drones, vehicles, and people with or without the use of GPS to stay connected. Was Niantic developing weapons or making decisions in regards to active combat? No, but they were playing a role that is arguably just as important. They were helping AI-powered drones understand where they were and help them stay coordinated with personnel on the ground. Technology originally marketed as a way to make your Pokemon catching experience more immersive was now helping drones, vehicles, and soldiers coordinate on the battlefield. Niantic has continued to become a more prominent part of the defense sector. Recently, the visual positioning system received awardable status through a federal marketplace, Tradewin Solutions, meaning that government agencies were able to negotiate deals and purchase the technology for their own use. And taking a look at Niantic Spatial's website, they appear to have struck deals with the United States Coast Guard and the Air Force. So this isn't some kind of crazy conspiracy theory. The data they gathered through Pokemon Go was used to develop mapping technology that is literally being used by the military.
I did not
I'm not
know
sure
it was
how
that
many
deep with
Pokemon
Pokemon Go
players who agreed to participate in AR scanning would have done so knowing that this was going to be used for the military, which is why now tons of players feel like they were straight up lied to. When Niantic first introduced the AR scanning feature, the company was transparent about their intentions to an extent. It told players that these scans would be used to create a better gaming experience, and while they did make it clear that this data would be used in apps outside of Pokemon Go, I'm not sure if anyone expected military defense applications, which is why it seems as though this was always the purpose of creating this technology. When you think about it, Niantic was never really a game developer. They have always been a mapping company. Think about their origins. John Hankey's first business, Keyhole, had direct ties to the CIA, and he later went on to work a high-value job in Google's Geo division. He always has been aware of the massive price tag governments are willing to place on data, and with Pokemon Go, Niantic had access to information that wasn't available anywhere else. Pokemon Go was meant to be a family-friendly experience. It drew players in with the promise of getting to be fully immersed into a core part of their childhood in a way they never could before. It was also a defining part of many of Gen Z's childhoods. But the dark reality is that if Pokemon Go proved anything, it's that you were never actually playing a game. The game was playing you.
That is so crazy to think about, actually. We weren't playing a game. It was all for data for the government. I'm mind blown, actually. I don't know what to say.